Okay, this is part 25 of Federalist number 10. And remember, the main theme is enlarging the sphere and refining the choices of people that we're going to elect to represent us. Expand the sphere. Make the area that you're going to choose your representatives from a larger area. And you'll get more qualified people, better qualified people, wiser people. And at the same time, you can prove the opposition wrong. The opposition says the large republic cannot work. It's not homogeneous. People are of different religions, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. Publius says, no, actually enlarge the republic, because we know that in a free republic you're going to have factions. And these factions will only be looking after their own interests. But what we'll do is enlarge the republics, and there won't be only one faction to take over the show, to run the show, to say this is how it is, and crush the opposition. No, we will have many factions, and these factions will keep each other in check. Remember, they look at human nature with very sober eyes. They constantly say, regardless of who you look at, human beings are looking after their own self-interest. They give priority to their self-interest. They think of themselves first before thinking of the public. In that situation, if we're going to frame a government, make a government, establish a government, we have to make sure this government takes human nature into account and remembers that when people have power, they only look at their narrow interest, and they'll try to violate other people's rights. So we have to have a system of checks and balances, division of power, independent judges, independent judiciary, so that judges will not be afraid to lose their salary, lose their job, if they're going to make a decision that's for the good of the country rather than for the good of one city or one state. So that's always in play. Put a faction against another faction. Put an interest group against another interest group. That's why we need to enlarge this sphere. Okay, let me continue reading. To the other point of difference is the greater number of citizens and extent of territory which may be brought within the compass of a republican than democratic government. What we were just talking about. You can make the compass of a republican government larger. You can make the area that a republican government covers larger than a democratic one. Democratic one is the one that we talked about, a system where people, instead of their representatives, vote. In a small city-state like Athens, or city-states that were around it, pure democracy, that people directly vote rather than their representatives. And it is this circumstance principally which renders factious combinations less to be dreaded in the former than in the latter. So he says, the dread, the ugliness that factions bring in a republic that's got expanded area, that encompasses a large area, you don't have to be afraid of factions, dreaded factions, because the smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently will a majority be found of the same party. In other words, if a place is small, you can easily find the majority dominating the minority, okay? Because the number of interest groups, the number of factions are going to be small. So the majority will dominate the minority, will violate their rights. And the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily will they concert and execute their plans of oppression. So they can get together, concert, plan together, organize together, and dominate over the minority. Okay? This is in a small area. However, he says, extend the sphere, and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. You make it less probable that the majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. Or if such a common motive exists, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and to act in unison with each other. Besides the other impediments, it may be remarked that where there is a consciousness of unjust and dishonorable purposes, communication is always checked by distrust in proportion to the number whose concurrence is necessary. So he says, extend the republic, extend the sphere, and even if there are factions, other factions will check it. These factions cannot communicate as easily in a larger area than they could in a small area. Okay, remember Rhode Island? Because it was small, majority could get the legislator they wanted, pass laws that they wanted without respecting the minority's rights. Okay? But he says, if your sphere is large, if your republic is large, for example, look at Pennsylvania here, okay? People on the east might have one religious belief or might be of a certain sect, and let's say people on the west might be of another sect, and people on the north might have their interest in something else. So these will oppose each other, okay? And the wiser people will have to decide. The wiser people get elected, and then they have to balance all these interests. But if you had only one religion dominating the most of the state, then that one religion could get its way and crush the rights of minority. But if you have multiple factions, multiple interests, they keep on checking each other. They keep each other on check. They're always watchful of their interests so that they won't get run over by the other groups. That's why he keeps on saying, extend the sphere, because there will be multiple factions, multiple parties, multiple interests, and they will keep each other in check. They'll keep one another in check. Because remember, he does, excuse me, he does not trust the citizen, because he knows human nature being self-serving and self-interested. He says you can't expect people to put the public good ahead of their own good. They always look at their own interests first. And that's the same thing for groups and factions. So he says, let's build a system, a large sphere, where multiple factions keep an eye on one another. Let's have a judiciary, let's have a legislative branch, let's have an executive branch, and these will keep each other in check. Let's even divide the legislative branch into two parts, a bicameral. Have a House of Representatives that's democratic, that most of the people can vote for representatives, but have a Senate that is not elected, the senators are not elected directly by the people, so that they can check the House of Representatives. They can keep an eye on the House of Representatives in case the House of Representatives does something that might violate the rights of minority. The Senate will stop them. So this is all checks and balances, division of power, putting a faction against another. That's how this system is designed. So keep that in mind as we go forward. We have 2 paragraphs left, and we'll tend to those in the next video or two.